Okay, go live. There we go. Okay, we're live.
All right. Hello.
Share your screen.
Yes, and so now let me get the timer up, and we're going to advance that. Go live. There we go. Okay, we're live. And
All right. Hello.
Share your screen.
There's that, and then I'm going to share my screen, and here's the timer. Okay, let me go a little bit more. How does that look, Jeff?
Good.
Okay, great.
And start the video.
Oh, I thought it started. There we go. Thank you. That always helps.
Yeah.
I like your yellow and blue yin yang. That's the Ukrainian colors.
It keeps changing colors.
I see, but when it's there now, it's Ukrainian. I like it. I'm Slava Ukraine.
Yes.
I'm all for Zelensky and his people very strongly. And the Russian people, get them away from that violent government that they have. Misguided one.
Yeah. But the yin yang cycles through the whole rainbow.
Wonderful. Very nice. Excellent yin yang. I love it.
Jeff designed that.
Very good. In Tibetan, they call it a bliss swirl. Sometimes three yin yang and a third thing.
Hmm.
I don't know, yin yang and LGBTQ plus.
Exactly.
They do have. So what's going on? The people are hearing some recorded thing?
They can hear everything that we're saying, actually.
I see.
And they know that the program won't officially begin until the top of the hour.
I see. Okay.
So, Bob, you were telling us about how you were just at Menla and you were part of a ceremony today.
Well, no, it was the end of a seminar.
End of a seminar.
Which was a kind of Tibetan Buddhism and Sikhism dialogue about bringing in His Holiness the Dalai Lama's idea that all the religions should cooperate with one another, and they should seek to find out that they don't need to convert other people from other religions to their religion, because all of the religions are doing the same job of trying to help people be more happy, cause less trouble to themselves and others, and have good lives. And so the two we were working with were Buddhism and Sikhism, because that was our history. And we were doing it in a particular context of seeking to heal the relationship between the humans and the underworld serpent dragon deities who are control the water system of the planet and who are very hard pressed by our pollution. That, not only the climate change, atmospheric pollution of the carbon, but also the fracking, all the fossil fuel, because the fracking itself is about fossil fuels. So the whole terrible fossil fuel industry, which has gone out of control and is poisoning the nest of all the life forms on the planet. So it was within that context of trying to appease and heal the wounds caused to the underworld beings from all this polluting that the humans have been doing. And in the midst of that, of course, the pathways to enlightenment that both Sikhism and Buddhism have. I don't know what you know about Sikhism, except that the Sikhs wear turbans and have beards. But it's a marvelous religion, and it grew up in the 16th century. And in the middle of the sort of Muslim conquest, the Mughal, that is to say, Muslim conquest of Hindu India, which still, of course, is the major struggle going on in India. between Pakistan and India, and which was inflicted on them to a worse degree than in the past by the British. When they left, instead of leaving it as one country, they divided it into the Muslim country and the supposed Hindu country, with nevertheless 200 million Muslims in the Hindu country, and then a pure Muslim country next to it, leaving it for 75 years of conflict, which was the old British thing of divide and rule. So even though they left the conflict behind on purpose to keep that country backward, because they'd have to be spending a lot of money to defend themselves from each other. And the British knew, and Churchill was a nice guy and very useful, very smart in fighting off the Nazis, but he was not good with his colonial possessions. He very much didn't like letting go of them. And he was therefore rather harsh as a colonialist. And he wounded the great Indian civilization by dividing it in that way. He and Lord Mountbatten and the other British foreign policy people. So in that context, we were discussing the pathway to enlightenment of Buddhism and Sikhism. And then also, at the end, we did a ceremony, which we did this morning, where we called in the Indo-Tibetan ice cream truck into the neighborhood of the Nagas. And we had 10 gallons of milk and all kinds of cakes and cookies. And we gave them to the Nagas through a ceremony, which means eventually we ended up pouring them out into nature, which is a thing they do in Asia. Mm-hmm. And we did one here in America, in New York State. And we are very happy. The Nagas have been very nice to us in this last week by bringing lots of rain. We were being a little bit droughted in the Catskills Mountains, where that's very scary for us because we have a lot of vegetation. So a drought will bring on the danger of forest fire. But lately, the last week, they've been bringing very copious rain, beautiful clouds and beautiful breaks between the clouds. And so they seem to be pleased with us, the Nagas. And we like them. Actually, in Tibet, the Tibetans did not fish in their rivers because they believed that the fish were under the protection of the Nagas. So if you ate and caught a lot of fish and ate a lot of fish, that the Nagas would be offended, and then they would release epidemics in the country. Mm-hmm. So when the Chinese came, the rivers were teeming with fish, and they caught a lot of them and ate a lot of them. Chinese did. The Tibetans really don't like them. Don't like doing that.
So the fish are way up in the mountains of Tibet and the rivers there.
Yes, very plentiful, actually. Chinese discovered they were abundant. And they gobbled up lots of them in the last 70 years, since they invaded in 1950 and occupied the country. And their cruelty to the Tibetans has nothing to do with anything personal. It's just because they have been pretending that Tibet always belonged to them, which it didn't, which is a lie. But although other countries have catered to it with their eyes on the Chinese market and the Chinese cheap labor pool. And so the British, who know better, as usual, sold them out. And that they're trying to make the Tibetans into Chinese by not letting them learn their language and by suppressing their culture, and so that then that will make their lie truth, so that the Tibetans are just Chinese. But Tibetans don't agree with that, and it'll never work. It hasn't worked for 70 years, and it won't work. And they will someday change, but a lot of people have suffered in the meantime.
Go ahead, Emmy.
Okay, are we going now? Great. Hello, everybody. Are there, of course, we don't see them like in Zoom. We don't see the people, right?
No, they're on the chat. They're on a live chat. Welcome, everybody. This is Emmy Vadnais. I have the great fortune to be blessed with Jeffrey Mishlove, who is the host and producer of New Thinking Aloud, and also blessed to be with Robert Thurman, Bob Thurman, who is a professor emeritus at Columbia University and a scholar on Tibetan Buddhism. He is the author of this latest book, Wisdom is Bliss, and I had the great pleasure of interviewing you, Bob. We titled that interview on New Thinking Aloud, Wisdom is Bliss, where we talked about the four noble truths that you talk about as the four friendly, fun facts. Welcome, and welcome for joining us today.
Actually, it's very appropriate because there was a special thing for one day from the publisher, an ebook. You can get the ebook for $1.50. And you can send it to a friend for $1.50 for one day. It's like a special promotion, they're doing through Amazon, And I guess maybe through other ebook things too. I don't know, but I know about Amazon. So that's on the 15th of July. So in case anybody wants to send a friend the ebook, you can get a really cheap deal. I'll be sending 20 or 30 out to different friends on that promotion myself. So that's on the July 15th, next week. So great. So
it's a wonderful,
having me back. And by the way, I noticed Jeffrey Mishlove. What a great name. What is the love mixed with, Jeffrey? I hope it's mixed with joy.
Absolutely, joy and bliss and love.
Very good.
Everybody and everything all the time.
Okay, everything all at once, all the time. Finally, we got the Academy Award for that. That's really good.
Oh, yes, everything, everywhere, all at once.
That's what I call the infinite lifestyle.
Yeah.
Michelle Yeoh got the award, and then they got lots of awards, and I love that film. But that's what we all live. We all live life like that. If we were just open-minded to it, we wouldn't feel stressed out. So that's where we would have joy and bliss. So that's really good. Very auspicious.
Thank you. I feel when I was a child, I was sort of embarrassed to have a funny name like that, but
I think it's great.
See it as a blessing.
Excellent. Wonderful. We're lucky to have you with us.
Well, Bob, we're getting questions from our viewers, and the moderators are helping us with the chat. Just to get us started,
great.
Could you share a little bit about your background? Because you actually were a Tibetan Buddhist monk, and you have a very close relationship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who also, happy birthday, just had his 80th.
Had his birthday on the 6th. That's right. Happy birthday, Dalai Lama. Actually, there's a video somebody sent me of two people, and they're singing happy birthday in that soundtrack, and they are skydiving, and they're flying down together like this. And then they get near to each other where they can touch each other, the two. I think it's a couple that I think the ones who sent it to me. And then they pull out a banner, and the banner has a picture of the Dalai Lama, and it says, "Happy birthday, Your Holiness." And as they're flowing down, the banner is flapping, I thought that was like one of the best birthday cards anybody could send anybody. I was put to shame by that. I thought it was really great. And you can maybe find it on YouTube or Instagram or something, but they sent it to me personally. So I don't know how they distributed it, but it was really great. And he's 88. Yes, he's 88 on the July 6th, which he shares that birthday with W. Bush, George W. Bush, and he's friends of W. Bush, but he says he didn't approve of Bush's invasion of Iraq. He begged him after 9/11, don't invade, it won't help. It will seem maybe like mission accomplished, but in the long run, it won't help and you'll regret it. The Dalai Lama wrote a letter like that to W after 9/11, while commiserating in 9/11, because he likes W. Yeah, and they have the same cancer birthday, July 6th. And W couldn't resist the push, the neocon Cheney push to invade Iraq under false premises, and he does regret it. Subsequently, we got ISIS, and then it was terrible. And so Dalai Lama's prediction to a world leader proved right. Unfortunately, Mr. Putin didn't ask the Dalai Lama's advice before his extremely ill-advised invasion of Ukraine. Equally stupid. So anyway, that's the July 6th. So today, however, is everybody's birthday, and everybody who has joined us, happy birthday to you. Every day, after all, when you fell asleep at night, you could never wake up. Something could happen. So every day when you wake up, you're reborn. So that's born again. So happy birthday, everyone.
And could you just share a little bit about your journey?
Oh, yeah, about me? Yeah, sure. Well, I was born in Manhattan Island, a few blocks from the mayor's house. There used to be a hospital there called Doctors Hospital, 89th and York Avenue. And actually later I had organized a seminar in that hospital 50 years later, and brought the Dalai Lama there and mentioned to him I was born in this building. And he laughed. And at that time it was a pediatric neuroscience hospital for children with brain issues, and it was amazing. His Holiness went into sort of the patient room, some of the more hopeless cases they had. They all rushed toward him, and he greeted all of them and hugged them and told them it would be all right, and whatever happened, it would be okay, and they'd be fine sooner or later. And even if they lost the body, they'd find a new one. And I mean, it was an amazing event, actually. And then he met with some academics and some scholars and doctors, and he was very happy because some people who had made a study that a revision of the type A personality study, in which they said that it wasn't just being loud and aggressive that made you in danger of heart attacks and difficult health, which was what the original type A study about a type A personality, but it wasn't just your loudness and your sort of forward energy. It was how often in your interviews that the huge, tens of thousands of people they interviewed for that study, but in the interviews they analyzed with the computer, and how often the word I, me, and especially mine, the possessive pronoun, what was the frequency of the use of the possessive pronoun in being interviewed and talking about my this and mine that and my. The people who used it at the highest degree were the ones in the longitudinal study that had the heart attacks. Because when you're over focused on yourself, it's bad for your health. And that is the Buddhist teaching, of course. Self-centeredness, excessive self-centeredness is unhealthy. And so he was thrilled at that. That all happened in that hospital. Anyway, I was born there. I'm sorry, I know I digress. But I was born there. And then I grew up and I went to school. I come from sort of impoverished gentry, you could say, if you were a sociologist. Both sides of my family, my father's side, they lost all their fortune in the Civil War because they were Southerners. And so they lost their plantations, et cetera, et cetera. And my mother's side, they were on the northern side. They were from Pennsylvania, and they had a big farm in Allegheny County, which now is downtown Pittsburgh. And they had a lot of money. And then my mother's father, however, was a professor of English literature, but he was not a good businessman. And he made a lot of real estate investments that didn't work out. So I had the privilege of living with my grandfather and grandmother because they lost all their money anyway. So my mom and dad lived in New York. They had run away from their family. And so I didn't really know my whole hinterland family, like true New Yorker, a little bit deracinated family. And also I felt as my youth that I was from somewhere else. I always felt I was not a real American or something, and that I would be eventually revealed that I was one of the Four Musketeers or something, from France or whatever it was. That I would read those kind of novels when I was a kid. But anyway, I went to a British school called St. Bernard's, all boys, and they would hit a switch. They would switch the back of your legs if you didn't memorize your Latin in the third grade. And I didn't really enjoy it that much, but it did help me learn to write, and I learned languages right away and this kind of thing. So it was what you call a good education. I then went to Phillips Exeter Academy, again, that as a good education. And then I got admitted to Harvard as an advanced standing student because I was really good in math and I had great SAT scores. So they admitted me as a sophomore. And around that time, I flipped out and decided I had a lot of Latin American friends, and I decided we would go save Fidel Castro from both Batista and also from communism. So there could be a wonderful, happy, free Cuba. It would be neither gangster run nor communist run. And luckily we were refused our subscription as mercenaries. But that was where I began to show that I was not happy with conventional American culture. I dropped out. Then the Harvard people said, well, you can come to Harvard because you're a sophomore, even you didn't graduate from high school, because we already were admitted. And you're a sophomore already, so you're not going to have to be a freshman. But you can't come for a year. You have to show stability. So get a high school diploma and then come back after a year. So instead of doing that, I lived in Mexico for a year, learned Spanish really well, and was a bit of a playboy, I guess, having fun. Yeah, at 17, 18 years old. And then I came back to Harvard, and then I fell in love with my best friend's older sister. And we had a wonderful affair, and I didn't do any study my first year at Harvard. And then we got married, which was really a bit strange because she was a bit older than me, but all right, we were in love. And her father helped us do that. And then we had a beautiful daughter and so on. And then I lost an eye in a garage accident, which was very lucky as it turned out. It was a shock, of course, when it happened, but it was very, very lucky because I then had a midlife crisis at 20. Oh. And that's a good time to have a midlife crisis. We married when I was 19. And then at 20, late 20, I had a midlife crisis. And then I told my dear wife, and I said, let's go to India and get a real education instead of this business they're dishing out at Harvard. I said, we need yoga. We need the yoga of your mind, the yoga of the emotions, because I've been reading about this kind of thing. And she said, oh, no, we can't do that. You're just going crazy because you lost your eye. Why don't you go to a psychiatrist and get cured or something? And then I refused to do that. And so then we did split up, sadly, which I was very sad. But anyway, I signed away, gave away everything, went off to be like Buddha leaving his kingdom. I was imitating a little bit Siddhartha, if you know the Buddha story, where he was married, he had a son, but he then wanted to attain enlightenment. So then I was imitating him foolishly, because I'm not up to his standard. But anyway, I did. And I went off to India alone and hiked into Asia. Occasionally I accepted a ride on a truck, mostly walked, and got to Delhi finally. And then I met the Tibetans, and I met all kinds of Sufis, Christian mystics, Muslim mystics, and various kinds of spiritual people, learned a few things, but none of them held my interest until I got to India and met the Tibetans. And then that was like homecoming for me, because I'm sure I had previous lives with them. And I learned their language in 10 weeks. Fluently speaking. I wrote beautiful calligraphy in their alphabet, which I didn't have very good English writing because I was rebelling, writing A, B, 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 B. And also our alphabet is very silly, A, B, C. A isn't A, it's A. B is B with an I vowel, the consonant B. I know C, there's no relation between B and C. Anyway, C is really pronounced ka, as in cat. It's when we say C, we're really making it into an S. In other words, there's a lot of things that are not very sensible in our English alphabet, whereas the Tibetan alphabet and the Sanskrit alphabet are very logical, and I loved it. So then I got gung-ho, but ironically, my dad passed away while I was beginning my studies with the Tibetans in India. Sadly, had a heart attack. And then I had to go back for a funeral. And then I met in New Jersey while waiting around for the family things. I met a lama, a Mongolian lama from Tibet in New Jersey, who became my real teacher because he was an amazing person. And he started really teaching me the deep teaching kind of, And nowadays when I'm talking my autobiography, I talk about he was my Mr. Miyagi. and from the Karate Kid, he was very unassuming. He wasn't very highfalutin, sitting on thrones and with big robes and everything. He wasn't like that. But he was really profound as far as knowing what was going on in the mind. And he was a fantastic teacher, very kind man. And he became like my second parent, mother and father. And I studied with him about 2 years, I would say, and first 2 years of my heavy study. And then by that, within a year, within 6-8 months, I was desperate to become a Tibetan Buddhist monk. And he said, no, you shouldn't try to become a Tibetan Buddhist monk. You're not here in America in order to be a Tibetan Buddhist monk. You're here to learn from it, but to do something else about it, and as a layperson. And I wouldn't listen, even though he was my guru, so to speak. But then, of course, he refused to be my guru. He said, no, I'm not your guru. I'm just a friend, and I'm helping you. But I'm not your guru, because if I criticize you, you might get angry with me, and then that would be a big sin for you. So I'm not your guru, but I'm just a friend giving you advice. And my advice is don't be a monk. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I like your other advice, but I don't like that advice. I want to be a monk. And I was just desperate to be a monk. So then finally, after about 2 years, he said, well, I'll take you to India with me. I have to go there to help some poor monks over there. And I'll introduce you to Dalai Lama, and maybe he'll make you a monk. So then my grandfather gave me some money to get for the ticket, and I went with him to India. And then he introduced me to Dalai Lama in 1964. And then when he introduced me, he said, well, Your Holiness, this crazy boy, American boy, is very, very intelligent, and he already speaks Tibetan, so I thought you'd like him. And also, he's very anxious to be a monk. He really likes Buddhism. And so I didn't want to make him a monk, but maybe you will. Although my advice is don't make him a monk. So I said, what do you mean you brought me to be a monk? Why are you doing that? So I started arguing with him. But anyway, he left me with His Holiness. So then His Holiness took about a year of studying with him. Then he left me in India. And after about a year, His Holiness finally gave in to my demand to be a monk and made me a monk. And it ordained me and all this. And I was really happy. And then I was annoying, I think, to the Tibetans who were monks, because I wanted to be more of a stickler about every little tiny monk rule. And they were a little more relaxed about all of them, although they kept the main ones. But they were, like eating after noon, they didn't care, whereas you're not supposed to eat after 12 o'clock, in the actual book, and I was trying to do everything by the book. So I was a little bit insufferable, I think, actually, annoying. But anyway, then I was a monk for about 2 years after that. And then I had a kind of some meditative achievements, I might call it, where I had some deeper insights. And then I finally realized, oh, that's what he meant, that it's not supposed to be a monk. Now I get it. I a little bit remembered previous life. And when I had been a Tibetan monk, and I realized that I had gone out to America to be reborn. And then in America, if you're a Tibetan monk in the 60s, nobody will listen to you. They think you're a cuckoo, you're nuts. So you can't help them, in other words. You can't give them advice that they will accept. So I resigned my robes and so on. Then I tried to give them back to my Mr. Miyage, Geshe-la. And he said, you can't give them to me. I didn't make them a monk. You send them to India to His Holiness. Because there's a ceremony if you abandon being a monk where you have to give back your robes rather than just tear them off and run off, And so I had to do that. I had to mail them off. And then about a month or two after that, I met my beloved wife, who a Swedish girl, my own age, who was looking, a little bit unhappy in life, but she was a famous supermodel from Sweden, a bombshell model. And all of our friends and all of her friends, all of my friends and her friends thought we were nuts, like this sort of spiritual guy who is an ex-monk now, but still he was a Buddhist. And this model, how can they ever get along? So they voted us least likely to succeed, and that was 56 years ago. So we've been having a fun time ever since then. And actually, the old Geshe-la helped me find her, because I was staying somewhere where she sometimes would visit, and I had seen her a couple of times, but we didn't develop anything because I was a monk. And then later I left that place. And then he brought me back there the very day when I actually really met her. And wow. And then, and I had quit being a monk on my own. And then I looked at her in a new way, and that was really something. But that's my story. Then there was kind of a choice, because I'd already been a Buddhist, living as a Buddhist monk for about 4 years, with the formal ordination and the robes for 2 years. And so I was a little tempted to become like a spiritual teacher, But my teacher, my Geshe-la, my wife, and who was that time my girlfriend, and my mother, all three ganged up on me, and they said, no, you have to go back and finish your college, and you have to have a BA, and then maybe you'll be a professor or something, and be a Buddhist teacher in some way in academia, So I reluctantly did that, and I'm so glad that I did, because then I got to learn Sanskrit well, and I learned a lot of things about history and about science and so on. So then I came to the insight, which I reveal in the Wisdom is Bliss book, about Buddhism, in a way, really Buddha's great contribution to the world, other than to people who become Buddhists, is the sort of scientific understanding of the mind and even of physics, of atoms, of quantum. He preceded quantum by thousands of years, about realizing the infinite divisibility of matter, the quantum insight about the micro dimension and so on. This was all pre-understood in India from ancient time, although they didn't make the machines out of it, but they did understand how nature worked in a very, very intelligent. And even their Darwin theory is better, I believe, better than Darwin's Darwin theory. So, and then I reveal all of that, which is kind of new in the Buddhist world, to really reveal that in this Wisdom is Bliss book. That's what the book is really about. It's about how the 4 noble truths, or the 4 friendly fun facts, are actually a therapy regime involving an education in ethics, in emotional self-management, and in science, the nature of life, what it is, what life is, what matter is, what mind is, how they work together, and which is superior, I'm sorry to say, to the curriculum of Harvard or Columbia. And I wasn't able to teach it as a professor in the university, because I couldn't really challenge that strongly the curriculum of those places, which are, our academic institutions are temples of materialism. And by that, I don't mean that they're raising everybody to be a material girl, like the Madonna song. Yeah. What I mean is the ideology that matter is all that exists, and there's no mind and no soul, and that a human being has a life that is only this one life. It's an accident. It's a random mutation. The whole planet is an accident and a random mutation. There's no purpose of history. There's no purpose of life. When you die, you're nothing. And really, the underlying reality is nothingness. And that is the religion, which you can call scientism, because it pretends to be science. It presents itself as if it was science, but it's actually religion with a belief in nothingness in place of God. So the final sort of destination, the final location, the final reality is just becoming nothing again. And in a way, you're already nothing, except for the biological robot that you occupy and you run around in, but there's no one occupying it. And even these modern people in that temple, they misunderstand spiritual teachings like Buddhism and other Indian yogic teachings, as well as other mystical teachings and their own Western mystical teachings. They misunderstand them as thinking that, as having sort of had a dim intuition that nothingness is the final goal, and that the heart of God is emptiness, nothingness. And so that's what they all teach. And the modern ones have now discovered it once and for all. And it's so deeply ingrained in our culture that it took me almost 30 years of debating with academics to realize that they're confused, in that they think somebody discovered that that's what happens to you when you die, you become nothing. But actually, of course, if you stop and think, nobody can discover nothing. And nowadays, I simply ask them, I don't get into a big discussion. I just say, okay, tell me who made the empirical discovery that nothing exists. If you can tell me that, then I might take your view of reality as plausible. But actually, newsflash, nothing is nothing. So nobody can discover it, and nobody ever did, and nobody ever will. So saying that's the ultimate reality is just a dogma. It's just an assertion. It has no grounding in evidence. So you guys don't have to ask me what is the evidence for former and future life, or what is the evidence that you have a spirit, that you have a mind that is not quite gross material that we can discover with some kind of machine measurement, and it doesn't weigh anything that we can measure. I said, you don't have to bother with that, because one thing you know is that there's no nothing, and therefore your presumption that that's where you're going is a delusion. So you're nuts if you're going to believe that. Then that means you're somewhat correct. Cuckoo. And they get quite annoyed, and actually there's nothing they can say. Because they have the law of thermodynamics. Energy is never destroyed, it only changes form. Consciousness is a kind of energy. It's an energy that responds to its observation of all the energies through our sense organs, all the energy changes that happen in our environment. And so it's itself a kind of energy. And therefore, it will continue to be a kind of energy when we're not in the body. And it was a kind of energy before it entered the occupation of this body, whenever that was, which in Buddhist view, they do agree with, I think, some of the Catholics. I don't think there's controversy about it. But in Buddhist view, the soul enters the body at conception, not at 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, at conception. But that doesn't mean that in any Buddhist society they would legislate the impossibility of not being able to host a visitor who has entered the womb inadvertently and without any preparations being made, and with an inability socially to take care of it and so forth. So they would never legislate this, like the way Amy Comey Barrett and the other loonies, after lying and saying they would stick with established law, they then quickly jumped to their own dogma. But on a way, physiologically, the Buddhists would agree with the Catholics, actually, but not the legislating and forcing people to do that, especially people who don't actually believe that. Then they don't consider that they're eliminating a life. They're inviting some being to go find a different body. That's all. So it's not murder. That's wrong. Unless someone knows. If they know, then it's a little more serious. In regard to that controversy, which I think people should be able to recognize, that you can have a belief and you may be right, but you have no right to impose that on people who don't have that belief, is the thing. And that's a Dalai Lama's kind of view about it. And I agree with him. Actually, early in my studies with him, we were more like pals than the teacher, and he would send me to his own older teachers that I would learn formal Buddhist philosophy and things from. And he and I were more or less like pals. But then he already was teaching me too in some things which I didn't agree about. For example, although he made me a monk, he taught me that Buddhism is not the solution for everybody at all. And he urged me always to be very respectful about Christianity and any kind of monotheism that other people have. Although Buddhists do not believe in a creator, they don't believe in blaming any one person for the world. We all make a mess together. This is Buddhist view. But although their Buddhist view is also, there are gods, very powerful ones, that would seem like they could have created everything, but actually nobody created everything. Everybody else has a hand in it, is the Buddhist view. So I call it infinitheism instead of monotheism. Infinitheism. Everybody's intercreating everything is the idea. And there's a Buddhist text where the one who the other people in Buddha's time thought was the creator says to someone he sends to give a message to Buddha, he says, please tell people, Buddha, when you give teachings, that I didn't create them and I'm not omnipotent. I'm very powerful and I like them and I try to be helpful, as helpful as possible. But when horrible things happen to them, which sometimes happens to people, I didn't make it like that. I wouldn't, if I had omnipotent power, no horrible thing would ever happen to anybody. But I don't, because they have their own power to make a mess. And that's the nature of things. So that happened. That was from a way ancient time. So it's not atheism, but it's not creator theism, Buddhism. It's like, as I say, infinitheism. We all have that divine energy, to different degrees, and us, of course, much lesser than some gods do. But so therefore, it takes all of us. It takes a village to make a mess, as well as to make a nice country. That's my life story, okay? Except that, not quite, because I'm 82. My wife and I are both 82. And the Dalai Lama is 88. And he has said, he said, I don't know if he's really serious or he was just getting revenge on me, because, I caught him in public one point when he was kind of saying, I don't know, I might go any time and everything. And I said, well, I heard a prophecy, you can live to 120, Your Holiness, come on. And you sometimes used to tell Tibetans that you could stay a long time if necessary to help them. And he said, oh, that was in Tibet, and now all these things have happened, blah, blah. But then he said, well, I could live to 103, actually. His doctor had told him after giving him the life pulse diagnosis. And so then I said, okay, 103, then you must do it. And we ask you, please, to do it. And then he was annoyed and said, well, you have to stay as long as I do then, since you're saying that to me. So then he said to 97, I have to say. Then the next day he came and said he had a dream, and some spirits told him, some goddess or something, that he could make 113. So then he was laughing, going, ha, 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 then you have to stay to 107. He said, and I said, okay, I'll try. And then lately he's copped out, and he said he has publicly announced to his Tibetans 110. That's all I'm going to do. And therefore, I have to make it to 2045. So although I'm 82 now, that means I have 22 more years of hard work to do. And my wife says she's not up for it. And she also repeats what a friend of ours said, 80s are not for sissies. Even.
Well, you and Mina have given so much with the Tibet House and the Menla Spa and Retreat. And
she really did that. She's who made all those things. She's the organizer, she's the designer, she has the good eyes, she manages the people. She's terrific, really. She really is. I go yak. I give talks and write books, but she's really the one who serves the community in the really best way. She really is. I totally owe her 100%. And therefore I beg her to stay as long as I do. And she said she'll try. Actually, she is trying. She's just not confident about it. Well, I'm not either, for that matter. And I think Dalai might have just been teasing me because we're schoolmates, kind of thing. Well, okay, you're going to stay. Well, then you have to stay. This sort of thing. I think I can really make it.
Robert, we have a question in fact, many questions coming in from our viewers.
Okay, what are some more questions? I'm sorry to be so lengthy on that one.
Oh, we love everything you share.
But that was my autobio,
Yeah.
I'm writing it, actually. I have hired someone to help my wife write hers. It's almost finished, and then I have to quickly write mine to fit with it.
Well, here's a question related to your biography. It comes from Matthew Ingram, who has been a guest on New Thinking Aloud.
Oh,
and
good.
He notes that you wrote the introduction to an edition of Jack Kerouac's book, Wake Up.
Yes.
And wonders if you can discuss Tibetan Buddhism against the background of the counterculture and the extent to which you were influenced by the counterculture. And to my recollection, both you and your wife had a close association with Timothy Leary.
Yes, we did. And psychedelics are a good, helpful part of our development and study. And we're very happy that nowadays people are beginning to use them in therapy, which they were doing before the Leary explosion, the Leary and Ramdas Richard Alpert Ramdas explosion. And then that got it sort of outside the medical context, and it had a powerful impact in society in the 60s, of course, both positive for some people inside the movement, and then freaked out, I think, some of the more fundamentalist people outside the movement who are still freaked out, as we notice lately very much. But I think it's good that they be used in therapy and to help heal people who are desperate and they're taking heroin and they're killing themselves with fentanyl, and it's really awful. Suicide epidemic that's going on nowadays is really, really bad, especially among young people. It's just terrible. And part of it comes from them thinking that if they kill themselves, they're going to be anesthetized. So then they won't be regretting and they won't feel the emotional misery that they feel. And meanwhile, they'll just be in a new life with a headache or emotional upset. So it's not going to change a thing, except they will have lost their precious, beautiful human body. So the future life thing is very, very important to help make them take the trouble to heal themselves while staying alive instead of hurting themselves like that. Anyway, that's a little bit digression. But yes, so, and actually I would enhance that even more, what the gentleman said in the following. I recommend a book by someone named Stuart White, which is called Transcendence, which I recently only read and I loved it, in which he says that the Dharma, which means to say the Buddha's teaching, which really the basic thing in that teaching, and the basic thing in my Wisdom is Bliss book, therefore, is that reality itself is goodness, it's excellence. Any monotheist who thinks that God is love genuinely, and therefore doesn't believe in the horrible legends about hell, or that God would send non-Christians to hell, or all kind of, the nasty stories that they have in ancient time when they're trying to terrorize people with a nasty God, They don't believe that. But any monotheist who really thinks God is love, and love means that you want your beloved to be happy. That's what love means. That's the meaning of love. And therefore, if God is love, that means reality. If God is the almighty reality, then the reality, the deepest reality of life is love. And the life force itself is love. And that is what Buddha discovered and taught in the Indian context 2,500 years ago. And that's why his teaching has been popular. The friendly fun fact about suffering, which is the first friendly fun fact or noble truth, the reason for that is that if you don't know that the ultimate reality is love, is clear light, we call it, we don't make it a person, like an individual person belonging to a particular culture, with a particular name given in that culture. We don't consider that's what the infinite love is. It's just infinite energy available to everybody in every culture. That's when it's called clear light of openness, clear light of freedom is what we call it, or transparency. And it's a very nice love concept, that it is what everything is made of. It's the life force. It's what everything is made of, and it is it. By making something out of itself, it doesn't cease being it, in other words. So if you're made of love, it means you are love. Every fiber, every atom, every molecule, every element about you, and every bit of your spirit is all love. That's Buddha's discovery, and why he was popular, and his method of coming to understand that was considered useful teaching. Okay, so Stuart White's book called Transcendence, what he says is that sort of worldview of the goodness of reality, and then that there are methods of how you can actually experience it and live it, which also then, once you learn it a little bit, you can find it in every spiritual tradition in the world. You don't have to be a Buddhist. He said the people who taught that in the West, before there was like the Zen master or the Dalai Lama or some book from Sanskrit or something, were the artists. And the Shakespeare, playwrights, Shelley, Keats, the painters, the impressionists, the pointillists, Picasso, so et cetera, So in all of the different cultures, the artists, who are people who kind of saw the beauty in things and who then tried to reproduce that through whatever their measure of art was, even through music, who became inspired and wrote beautiful symphonies and or played ragas on their things. So the artists have always gotten down to the deep flow of beauty that is reality. And then people who were very uptight about it and were terrorized by cultures, East as well as West, to be afraid of reality, which the authorities in authoritarian cultures always want you to be afraid, because then that makes them indispensable. They'll protect you, they'll fight off the enemy. They will pave over the jungle and kill all the snakes or kill all the tigers or something and kill all the wolves, and then you'll be really happy, etc. Okay, so the cultures of this world of the last few thousand years have pretty much universally frightened us to death, to be a living dead, very scared of everything, ready to go, go to heaven and get out of here, And whereas the Buddha and the artists and Jesus and the great mystics of all traditions, they tell us that actually heaven is right here if we're really open-minded and loving, and turn the other cheek, love your neighbor, love others beyond yourself, and all this. They are showing us that. So the Kerouac and Ginsberg and these kind of people, they were the artists, and they were trying to shake people up out of their delusional culture about we're Fortress America, everybody else is bad, and even the native people that we killed off here to occupy, to steal their land, they were bad. And then the blacks are bad, and blah, blah, blah. And Mexicans are bad, and Canadians are bad. I don't know, everybody, Russians are bad. Everybody's bad. And therefore, you have to pay taxes to have a huge army, and you can't have any daycare centers. You can't have a good salary because you have to suffer, because everything is very scary, and even the ticks are going to kill you if you don't look out, sort of thing. So that's the authorities' job, is to scare everybody. And the beatniks and all artists, the Keats and Shelley, they weren't beatniks, but they were William Blake, but they were great poets, and they somehow broke through the culture and saw the beauty of life. And they wanted to open our hearts and minds to that beauty. That's why we later like them, even though during their lifetimes they're often persecuted and considered kind of awful. And look in Europe, how many women were burned, wise women living in the suburbs who knew about some herb, which was a cure for the common cold. And then somebody scapegoated them and said they did witchcraft on me, and then they were burned at how horrible to burn them. Some nice old lady, as a wicked witch or something. That's just terrible, being scared, so scared. That's how we've been, So now we're getting to where the scare business is not working. I mean, it does work, but it's not working because actually we can't exterminate everybody else. We can't pretend that, like Putin tried to pretend there's no Ukrainians, they're just Russians. If they insist on trying to be something different than Russians, they should all be killed. But they obviously can't kill them all, and actually he's killing himself. That's what he's actually doing. And a lot of Russians with him. So I consider the Ukrainians are liberating the Russians, actually. And if they listen to their own poets and their own Solzhenitsyn and their own artists, like Mayakovsky, like all Pushkin. Russia's greatest poet was a black, actually. Pushkin was a black. Which they like to pretend Pushkin, he must have been a Russian. Yeah, he was Russian, but he was a black Russian. Just like the greatest people, a lot of the greatest people who gave us the blues, they gave us Elvis, actually. He was just imitating them. He was one whitey who was imitating them, black dancers and the blues singers and this and that. They are so energetic and lively and wonderful in spite of all the hardships we've dished out to them. So we should stop being scared, and we should start being happier ourselves, and that should be our challenge, And then we'll be nicer to other people, and we won't waste so much money on our military. If the climate change thing, we're also wrecking everything with that. It's really awful what they're doing. I don't know if you realize that, because the corporate greenwashing people are saying, oh yeah, we'll be this clean in 2040, 2045, they keep saying. But they're not making a step toward it. They're increasing the amount of fossil fuels they sell, they develop, they discover underground, they're completely relentlessly destroying everything. And that's some new thinking. And here's the new thinking. And then, you know what, one really new thinking thing I like to offer to the new thinking people. Nowadays we worship, the young people do, and we did when we were young. We go to rock and roll concerts, the Grateful Dead, the Beatles, you know, Taylor Swift, and then there were previous ones in the past, you know, Rihanna, Beyonce. And it's like going to a temple, going to church, and there's thousands of them in a stadium, and we're rocking and rolling, and we're feeling great, and feeling the life force in us by the way they present energy instead of fearing them. And that's really great. So we're coming to this stage where we're going to live our lives in a happy way. And we're going to do it. And people who are being gringy about it, no, you can't be happy. I'm going to, because that's terrible. And I'm going to make you like you used to be, all uptight, you know, well, let's have slaves again. Let's be better than other people again. You know, that's really wrong. And because why? Nobody can win a war. Who won one lately? Nobody. Oh, we won World War II. No, we didn't. We defeated the Russians, and immediately they were our enemies. The second we finished off Hitler, the Russians were the arch enemy. We started competing with the KGB. Our CIA started competing with the KGB to recruit Nazis. We brought them to New Jersey. We put them into our different offices, our spy networks. We brought their scientists to help us make A-bombs and so on. And so did the Russians. So we're still into that fight the enemy routine. You can't live life until you killed off all these other people. And they thinking the same way, and so it never ends. So that's what's ending now. It isn't that these are all new, these things. It's the same thing. But the fact that they don't work, we had to leave Vietnam in shambles. We had to leave Afghanistan. The Iraq is a total mess. And then maybe the Israelis think they won. Netanyahu does. And he's now trying to exterminate all the refugees there in their camp and have more settlements, kick them out to Jordan. But that won't work. There's millions of them, more than 10 times the population of Israel. They can't possibly, that's not a win when you have to make a wall and with machine gun a human being who comes across. Then how do you treat your other neighbor? Well, if you finish killing them off, then who else left to fight with? You'll be starting to shoot your neighbor who doesn't believe the same way, fundamentalist Orthodox way you believe. You'll fight internally. So that's not a win, that's what I'm saying. We want everyone to live, including the ones who are misguided and behaving like that, but they have to start being loving and happy, and that's new thinking. And the new thinking is they can do it. And one thing that we have, a real problem that's implanted in our consciousness and our culture, I call it a kind of self-defeatism. I've often given lectures to thousands of people, and I ask them, how many here in this room think we will meet the climate change challenge and really change the energy system on the planet into a green one? How many of you think so? And there'll be about 40, 50 hands out of 1,000 people at first. Then I say, come on now, really? You know, you're saying you would like to see it happen, but you really think we can control ExxonMobil? We can control Joe Manchin? We can control, the right-wing presidents that we occasionally get who are for the fossil fuel, who are paid for by the fossil fuel people, and the media that is all commercialized by the fossil fuel people and the car companies and blah, blah, blah. Do you think we can really do it? And when I keep saying, do you really think it gets down to maybe 2 or 3 people in the front row out of 1,000? So we all think it's impossible for the weak little individual, just because we want to make a vote for something, we want to speak up for something, that it will work. We're convinced that it can. But the new thinking is, Obama expressed it actually, but he didn't necessarily live it. And that was, he got elected saying, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Whatever it is, yes, we can. We can have a good healthcare system. Yes, we can. For everybody, not just the rich. Yes, we can. We can do this now. Yes, we can. Then the minute he got in, he said, oh, whoops. His new thinking is, no, we can't. The ship of state, you can't turn it quickly. No, it has to go this way and that way. In other words, he's a great guy, but he he couldn't deal with it. He couldn't change. He felt he was convinced around him, couldn't handle a Congress, couldn't handle McConnell and company, et cetera. He felt, no, we can't. But actually, the new thinking is, yes, we can, and we're going to. And if anybody should convince us that we can, it's jolting Joe Biden. That's what I call him. I took the nickname away from DiMaggio and gave it to Joe. Jolting Joe Biden. He's little Mr. Biden. He's 80 years old. He's 2 years younger than me. But he did a lot of wrong things when he was a senator, because he likes to go along with people, So he went along with the bad guys, the military guys and the oil guys and whatever, the powerful guys. But he didn't enrich himself, actually. He's poor for a 40-year-long congressman and senator. He's relatively poor because he didn't sell himself, but he mentally kind of just got along with them, and 3 strikes you're out, and long prison sentences and many stupid things he did. But now, in the last few years since he came back, and I wasn't for him at first, but of course I did vote for him once James Clyburn saved him in South Carolina, then I voted for him. But point is, he's done everything good. He's really turned things around. That's amazing. More jobs created in America by him than 20, 30 years of Republican administrations ever created, because they were sending them out where you don't have to pay them, because you have the Communist Party making them into slaves for you in China. And so you can produce things for your Apple phones or your whatever it is. You can produce them at 30 cents an hour instead of $30 an hour with pensions. And then they pretend that's not the reason they went there. And it is the reason they went there, of course, to break our unions. And now Joe is supporting the unions. He's done all this subsidy. He's done infrastructure. And in spite of very many obstructors in Congress and so on, and in the media, constantly talking about old Joe, he might collapse at any minute. Well, so what? Then we'd have Kamala. And she'd find another good guy, maybe Gavin Newsom as VP. Really great governor in California there. A nice person, not someone who's glaring at you like wants to have you arrested. Like the one, the face of them, they look like that. We're going to make you great again.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
We have about a half hour left, and we have
yes, okay,
question.
sure.
I love it. The question was around culture, and you took a deep dive on it, and I think it's all relevant.
Good.
So what we're all.
If there's no separation between spiritual life and social life, and spirituality should be there, but not in the form of making everybody one religion. That's our strength in a country comes from our pluralism and respecting everybody's religion, as long as they respect ours. That's the American way. That's our strength.
Yeah, and I have another question from a viewer, Andrei Krasowski, who's a regular viewer and often asks great questions.
Okay, of course they do.
And this person asks, I recall that some years ago, the Dalai Lama encouraged some Buddhist monks to participate in neuroscientific meditation research. And I just did an interview with Susan Bauer Wu, who is the president of the Mind and Life Institute.
Yes, isn't she wonderful?
She is. And his question is, do you think it would be possible to do this kind of scientific research with psi research as well, which is what a lot of what New Thinking Aloud is about here, is parapsychology, or what you consider, I believe, supernatural abilities. Do you think that that's something that the Dalai Lama or
yes, of course.
Jeff, of course.
I never use the word supernatural. I use the word supernormal.
Supernormal.
Yeah, supernatural is used by materialists to mean impossible, because nature is everything. So if we say supernormal, then it could be natural to have psychic abilities, actually, and some people normally do, who are born with a special gift. But we can all cultivate them, actually, they say. If you do even one pointed meditation, and to a very expert degree, where you can really focus your mind and concentrate on a single thing without wavering for an hour or something like that. You can hold an image in your mind of a blue dot, or Jesus's face, or Buddha's face, or a symbol of any kind, and just hold your mind in that. If you develop that ability, all sorts of other abilities will come up in your mind. You'll find yourself sensitive to what other people are thinking. You'll become totally empathetic with different people. You will be able to have a little precognition. You'll see what is going to happen easily. You'll know what people are thinking or doing by their expressions. You will, because why? Because our awareness gives us so much more data than whatever we are narrowly looking for, and we then just take out of it, like, oh, that's the window over there, or that's a tree out there, and then we sort of stop looking at the thing. But we're getting a lot more information than we are normally paying attention to, because our mind is skittering around and being distracted all the time. So if you develop a very strong concentration, what it enables you to do is then, when you want to concentrate on what somebody else is thinking, or when you want to concentrate on what is likely to happen tomorrow, you really will know it. You'll have like precognition, or you'll have clairvoyance, or these various other what are considered supernormal abilities. Then the ones that involve telepathy and be able to move material objects or even see through them, like Superman, X-ray vision, which are part of the supernormal things. That's a little, you have to go deeper than just one-pointedness, and you have to be able to really understand, become sensitive to your own, atoms and molecules and micro dimensions. You need to be able to get so concentrated you can talk to the little creatures in your own microbiome and make them happy. And that's also possible, actually. It's not supernatural. It's a deeper level of awareness of subtlety. And what His Holiness has spent 40 years talking on and off to various materialist sciences, and he likes to learn about them because he thinks they are wonderful, many things they've discovered. He does think that the materialism as a dogma is unscientific, which is what I think I can prove easily. He doesn't like to be aggressive like that and actually prove it, because then their egos will get like this, and then he won't be able to talk with them. So he kind of lets them go on and on about it, and he doesn't push them much in the thing. And in fact, I get frustrated in those meetings a little bit, in that I think they don't ask him enough questions. They tell him how brilliantly their latest discovery is about this and that subtle thing in matter, or about this thing in the genes, or about that thing in the other, as the years have gone by. And he is gently nudging them to look at ever subtler levels of reality. But he hasn't really shared with them what I call what the Indians, not just the Buddhists, but the Indians in their ancient sciences, they called the inner science, the Adhyatma Vidya, which was considered the king or queen of the sciences. Because after all, in the quality of life, the really important matter is, how do you interpret what happens to you? How do you react to it? How do you experience it? That's more important than what it is, actually. Because we all know how miserable we can be in the nicest of settings if our emotions get out of whack. We can be totally grumpy and upset and vengeful and vindictive and resentful and feel awful. And sometimes we can feel pretty good even in the middle of hardship, if we sort of focus on counting our blessings, type of thing. So how you manage yourself is the first thing that people need to do. And so he's been nudging them towards that. And by doing neuroscience, they're not going to get that by itself, because neuroscience, after all, is treating the mind, that it's what they call an epiphenomenon of the brain, that is to say, a secondary phenomenon of the brain. It's actually an illusion. You, Emmy, and Jeffrey think you're over there as a person, and that your brain is fooling you into that. Actually, what you essentially are is nothing, according to them. You have to realize that. You're already nothing. And it's just that when you die, the illusion ceases, and so you just come back to what you actually are, which is nothing. That's a ridiculous theory of theirs, which is actually ridiculous, since there's no such thing as nothing. So you are a subtle awareness entity and a continuum of awareness, and that subtle one works pretty well when you're young and healthy, both of you. And it works pretty well. You have sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. And it works through that. And also you can imagine seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, etc. You can have a dream where you have all those sensory experiences without your senses functioning. So your mind can reproduce all of that. And it will do so when you don't have your coarse senses anymore, because you have passed away. What we call passed away just means you've left this body. And the subtle mind energy will continue. So that therefore, the bottom line in the Indian inner science is that the priority in sciences is to learn how to manage that innermost process. Secondary to arrange the air conditioning, the environment, the food system, the this and that. That's secondary, but it's not unimportant, but it's secondary. And how your own soul functions, to understand that, is primary. And that's very sensible reorientation. And if science, when science eventually, not if, but when materialist science breaks out of the bad philosophy of the dogma of materialism and starts to begin to work scientifically, that is to say, experientially, observing, not having imposing dogmas on experience, and trying to be as open-minded as possible to interpret things, they'll understand that supernormal is still natural, and they'll learn how to develop and cultivate people to get to develop these powers and abilities if they're helpful to them, and they would be helpful. The more empathetic we would be, the less likely to harm other people, because we would feel the harm in the other people. And therefore, it would be like harming ourselves, and would be less likely to do that. I mean, demented people will cut themselves or hurt themselves sometimes. So that it's not going to be instantly stop all mutual conflict, but it would help toward it if we really felt like we could sometimes feel when your infant has an owl, when they're very infant, you kind of feel as if it's your owl. When a family is in a kitchen making dinner together or something, and somebody cuts themselves with the vegetable chopper, everybody goes, ah, like that before they run to the emergency room, And if that was expanded more, where people more sensitive to the other people would not be running each other over and shooting each other up in the mall and everything. They would less likely to do that. And therefore, that should be part of our education. But in my university, if I ask my class to meditate for half an hour, there'll be a big freak out of, oh, you're bringing religion into the campus. But that's not really religion. It's actually self-observation. It's part of learning what the person is, which is what a university should be teaching people. It's what are they? What is their emotion? They're not telling them you have to believe in this or that. They're saying, just please take some effort to look at yourself. After all, when you teach them French, they repeat, je suis, tu es, il est, je suis, tu es, il est. So that's kind of meditating. They're just repeating it to ingrain it. I am, you are, he is. Elle est, she is. And that way you memorize, and that way you learn it. So you're indoctrinating them in Frenchism. Somebody could freak out and say, you know what I'm saying? Similarly, like when they read Plato in a philosophy department, nobody's telling them to go worship Apollo. Do you know what I mean? Or Asclepius, like Socrates did. But it's how he thought they have to learn. That's important. So similarly, part of our curriculum should be for people to become more self-aware, more self-critical, and to be able to see their negative impulses and learn to control them, etc. But we have no teaching of ethics mainly in our universities. Therefore, everybody graduates and they want to go and have $1 billion and go to Wall Street and be the next junk bond king or whatever. They think that's all you do, because after all, it doesn't matter what you do with life, because there's no purpose to life. It's all meaningless. That's the philosophy that they teach at my university, and it's completely unevidenced, unscientific, morally harmful, and wrong, and they should change it. And George Soros tried to give $1 billion to Bard College to make a new university, but I don't know if because he was upset because of that horrible graduate of the university he created in Budapest, that Viktor Orban guy, who then became like a MAGA Hungarian and destroyed democracy in Hungary. And he's all for Putin and all this. That's really, and so George was upset that his university, and then shut down George's university, beautiful university in Budapest. So he wants a new one, but he didn't come and ask me about it. So I'm not that excited about it, but I hope they do a good job. So I don't know, what was the question? I forgot.
Well, the question was about how the Dalai Lama has done neuroscience research.
Oh, yeah, well, that's good. Yes, and Susan Baru, and it's really good that he does that, and it's good that they do that. But what he really likes is like Richie Davidson and Susan Baru, when they develop things where they can get kids in school to have emotional intelligence, and when they actually use it to teach people something. Richard Davidson doesn't really say to the Dalai Lama, actually, we're still doing animal experiments in our lab, and we're still trying to find neurotransmitters, and we're still trying to, get some more, cortisol enhancers or oxytocin enhancers or SSRI uptake inhibitor. But that's because that's what the university forces him to do, to have that lab. The university does not support him to cultivate kindness and to understand how people can develop stronger degree of compassion and kindness. But that's what the Dalai Lama wants them to do, education-wise. And they have done good things in that line, but it's not what the university wants them to do, unfortunately. University wants more patents, to more drugs, to make more money, because universities have wrongly got the idea that, like presidents of universities, they are just glorified fundraisers. They stop teaching. They don't go to classes. They hang out with millionaire trustees and try to get more millions out of them. And therefore, from the top down, the university is teaching by example to all of its students and the society the purpose of life is making money. And actually making money is destroying the planet. When that's the primary thing. I'm not against money, by the way. I know I just bought a house for my youngest son. I sacrificed some of my own pension to buy him a house, because of our granddaughter needs to get out of Brooklyn into some fresh air upstate. Have a tree in her yard giving her oxygen. And so I would like to get a bigger house for more of my children and other people. But so I'm not against it, but it's not the primary aim in life. And those multi-billionaires who run the fossil fuels, including MBS in Saudi Arabia, including the head of Iran, including Putin, who turned the brilliant culture of Russia into an oil company, so he could make money with his oligarch friends and go conquer countries in Africa with Wagner and all nasty things they're doing, instead of the country of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Tchaikovsky and fantastic Russian culture with the best borscht on the planet and great mushroom soups. And there they are killing themselves off, their younger generations, by pretending that the Ukrainians are not Ukrainians. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's beyond my belief. But Jolting Joe pulled together the EU, and democracy is going to flourish on this planet. And thanks to that effort. And the oligarchs are going to go down. And we're going to have a fossil fuel clean future. And within 15, 20 years, we have to have it, or we'll all be suffocating, actually. We will. I don't know, are you in New York State? I forgot where you are originally. But remember, we had this terrible smoke all over the East Coast from Canada Fire. Yeah. So that's a new normal, that sort of thing. It's not like that's a rare thing, and that'll pass, we can go around gulping air and running a marathon with clean air. No, that's the new normal if we don't change dramatically. And so the new thinking is, yes, we can do it. And I have a last thing I want to leave for new thinking. Everyone should visualize in their mind, however many people they think it is on the whole planet, whether it's a head of a petroleum type state or the head of a petroleum type corporation, or any politicians in the pay of them, the really top ones. The ones who make the decisions, we're just going to go on as it forever. We're going to find more oil. We're going to dig it up, burn it. We're going to be rich, and that'll be that. And then we'll muddle through whatever these hippies tell us about, that it's going to poison the planet. They must have made it up. It's not really real. Who are in that level of delusion. Are there 1,000? Are there 10,000? Are there 5,000? How many are they? But I think everyone will agree it only number in the thousands. Not as many as 100,000. The top decision ones, I'm saying, not the workers in the refinery or something. Top decision makers. Let's say 5,000, okay? Be really generous. How many are the rest of us on the planet? 8 billion, okay? And how many animals? How many trillion animals who will go down when the planet is unlivable? And those top people, maybe they have bunkers in New Zealand or British Columbia or Baffinland or Greenland, like Trump wanted to buy Greenland, remember? And maybe they have a bunker there, but what fun is that going to be? with their billions. Where Vegas will no longer be habitable. They can't go to Vegas and have a binge. No way. They're going to be in their bunker. So what's the use of that? Okay. So just think that, and then send to them very friendly vibrations. Guys, wake up. Think about it. Look up. Look up at the invisible cloud of poison you keep pumping into the sky. Al Gore says 600,000 nuclear detonations, waste pollution per day planetarily. Don't do it. Just turn it off right now. Invest your huge capital instead of more fossil fuel searching. You can pump a little more because we have to have bulldozers to make flat land to put solar panels on and so on. So you have a little more to sell, but put your main capital into switching immediately. By 2040, by the end of this, by 2030, end of this decade, cut it in half. By 2040, completely clean. You can do it in your lifetime. You 40, 50, 60-year-old multi-billionaires, you can do it. Elon, you can do it. You don't need to try to go to Mars. You won't get there by 2040. Okay? And every other one of us 8 billion people who are not making those decisions, just send them love. Please be happy. Whatever you want, we will do. We'll dance for you. We'll sing to you. We'll give you a massage. But whatever you need, we'll make it more fun for you than just adding more numbers into your already bloated bank accounts. That's new thinking. Because you know what? Yes, you can. And yes, we can. We can have a clean city, clean street, clean river, clean air. We can do it. And we can do it really quick, and we have to do it really quick. So that's the new thinking. That's the new spiritual practice. Okay?
Yes.
Right?
It's within all of us, and then it's how we're all interconnected. And we have a few more questions coming in for you, Bob. We've got just under 20 minutes left. Are there any?
Sure, go ahead, whatever.
Yeah. And we're so grateful for all that you're sharing with us, Bob, because
I'm happy, but I do have an appointment at 4 o'clock, so we can take another 20 minutes, sure.
Perfect. Jeff, are there any questions that are popping up to you would like to ask? Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
What's that?
Oh, Jeff has to unmute himself.
Sorry about that. I'm back. And we have a question here. It's an interesting question from Richard Downs Jr. It's related, Robert, to things that you've been saying. You pointed out that materialist philosophy suggests that we have no real self. And Richard points out there is a concept in Buddhism that's very similar called anatta, no self.
Yes.
And that, in fact, I know there are materialist Buddhists.
The thing is, though, that Buddha never said we don't have a self. He says we don't have a fixed, absolute, intrinsically real self. And intrinsically real is a specific kind of real. It's a reality that is constituted out of itself without needing any connection to anything else. So it's a kind of absolute self. So his no self means no absolute self, which is a relative self that knows that it's not an absolute self. But our relative self is imprisoned within our imagination, our mental construction, that we have an absolute self. And what that does is, therefore, when we have an impulse, like an impulse of hatred, an impulse of lust or greed, an impulse of jealousy, we think, or an impulse of depression and self-destructiveness, we think we have to obey it because it comes from an absolute source. Because we get mixed up by the meaning of absolute, just like the theologians, they say, oh, the God is absolute. Of course, oh, God is absolute. And he creates the world. Wait a minute, how did he create the world without connecting to the world? If he connects to the world, then he's relative. Because when you connect to something, you relate to it. When you make in order to make something, you have to relate to what you make. So that means you're a relative being. Even though you may be much bigger than what you relate to, you are still relative. So Buddha is only demanding this level of common sense from people to overcome the exaggeration in the self habit, or the identity habit is more technically called, that makes us think our identity of Jeff or Emma or Bob is an absolute. And actually, Jeff, someone can call you Joe, and you might change your name for whatever reason, and then you're going to start reacting to Joe rather than Jeff. And I react to Alexander instead of Bob, and people used to call me Tenzin, and they call me all kinds of names. And some kids of mine sometimes call me, hey, jerkwit. and I don't mind, because there's no absolute identity self, is what Buddha is saying. So he's not saying no self. The materialist does say no self ultimately, because you're nothing. What you are is nothing ultimately. That's what the materialist says, because that's what ultimate reality is nothing. And they feel ratified by that, by the fact that when you fall asleep, it's dark. When you go unconscious, it seems like you go into darkness. It seems like there's darkness between the stars and us. And okay, cosmic rays go through there, but the darkness is sort of nothingness. So therefore we think nothing, they think nothingness is kind of like a dark space where there's nothing in it. Right? And we even say nothing in it. So since there's nothing in it, and other words of ours have a referent, then the nothing must be what's in it. So nothing becomes something in our naive misuse of language, you could say. So Buddha's only asking for that common sense, which is that nothing is actually nothing. It's not an open space. It's not a dark space. And what it is that it's a word for what is not there. So therefore, no energy process of any kind will ever enter that nothingness. Nothingness will never get in its way. It cannot come from that nothingness. It cannot enter into that nothingness. So that's very different from saying that you don't have an absolute self. And similarly, in a way, you could say there's no absolute nothingness, in the sense that, well, there could be an absolute nothing, actually. You could say there is absolute nothing, which would mean you can't ever get there. You can't touch it. You can't relate to it. So in fact, if there was such a thing as absolute nothingness, it would be irrelevant to all of us relative beings. In fact, that would be the logical common sense thing. So what Richard is saying is correct. What unfortunately some American Buddhists, particularly from the Zen center dimension, they tend to think, and if they have a liking of modern secular scientific culture and they think of something great about it, they think, well, wow, Buddha anticipated our discovery that ultimately there's nothing. And ultimately there's no meaning and no nothing. And Buddha anticipated that. Isn't that great? So our modern nihilism fits with Buddhism. But that's totally wrong. In Buddha's own time, there were nihilists. They were called Charvaka. And they were eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, and there's nothing after that. And they were already those type, like Epicureans in the Greek, among the Greeks were like that. And so there's always been people who've used nothingness in a naive way to get out of the idea of ultimate consequence, and have then misbehaved, thinking they would get ultimately free without consequence. And the recklessness of our society, our industrial society on this planet, where we have industrialized greed in the form of industrial consumerism, we have industrialized violence in the form of industrialized militarism, and we have, in a way, industrialized misknowledge and misunderstanding in the form of global depression and global defeatism, and everybody feeling they're worthless and meaningless and they can't control affairs, and therefore they're doomed, and they're just going to have a little fun along the way. And all of those things we have done, which is said to say the three major poisons of a happy life, we have industrialized them. Actually, that's what modernity is, rather than some wonderful new thing. So let's be smart. Let's realize that the only absolute is all this relativity. And I have the way I complete my saying, my slogan, the slogan of wisdom is bliss, is there is no nothing, and therefore we are responsible to take care of everything. That's what we have to do. So when we know there's no nothing, love and compassion become mandatory, right? Because we're connected to everyone. So we want them all to be really happy, and we have the confidence that once they're really happy, they will want us to be really happy. And so that's what then we make it a happy world, rather than despaired world that is destroying itself, which is what we currently think we're trapped in. But we can change that, and we're going to. Yes, we can. Emmy is going to do it, and Jeffrey's going to do it. And Richard, did you say his name was Richard Dixon?
Richard Downs.
Richard Dale. Richard is going to do it. He's going to love everybody, and he's going to have common sense and realize that nothing is nothing. And he's going to take care of everything around him, and it's going to have a lot of fun, a lot more fun than he was having when he was thinking that it's all nothing.
So here's a question from one of our volunteers who is also helping moderate this live today that you're being so generous with us, Bob.
Yes.
She asked, so in light of what you're sharing, that there's all these challenges in the world, and we have our internal challenges, and you've been studying, you're a foremost world scholar on.
Never mind all that. Yeah.
Are you happy?
Yes.
Question. Yeah.
I'm ecstatically happy. Yesterday, we had a birthday party for my 25-year-old granddaughter, Maya Hawke, who she may know as one of the heroines of Stranger Things. And she was just also in another movie called Asteroid City. And there's a couple other ones she made. And she also had some records coming out. And of course, Maya means magic in Sanskrit, which can be also translated as illusion. Like illusionist is a magician, but magic is a more honorable way to translate that name Maya, because she's the mother of Buddha. It's called Mahamaya, great magic, and the mother of the universe, even in the dualistic philosophies, Indian philosophies, where they want to get out of the world into nirvana or something because they think the world is not well designed. She's the magic is the one that creates it. It's magically created. So anyway, we just had that party, and I'm so blessed. I feel so blessed and lucky to have such a wonderful partner and children and grandchildren, and to be in this free country. I'm not in Ukraine. I'm not in Russia. I'm not in China under Big Brother, Big Daddy, like bossing me around. And I just have Jolting Joe. We have an occasional lunatic like we had for a few years, thanks to the Russians in Gain. But that will never happen again, I believe. I'm confident. And so we're just totally blessed and lucky. But we have to use that happiness to be an activist and to make sure that people who think you're not supposed to be happy can't go and make themselves and us miserable. That we have to be sure of. So we have to be activists. And our spiritual feeling of happiness is instantly shared when we do the right thing, and we then feel really good. We really do. And I couldn't be happier, really. I could probably, but I'd have to work at imagining it. And I'm very happy to talk to Jeffrey Mixlove and to Emmy Budnes. I haven't figured out what Budnes really means.
Well, it's
something good though.
Well, it's French. The French say vadne, but yeah, something good. It is something good.
Vada in Sanskrit means like a philosopher, a teacher, Vada, an advocate. It's related to Vada, to speak, and speech and language, which is so precious and valuable in the form of poetry and mantra and so on, because we do organize our body and mind with speech. Actually, it's really one of the key components of life. And the old speech elements in the Indian culture are female, and they are making life livable. There's a network. The network, even though they are chauvinists in Brahminical culture, and they too much oppress and subjugate the females, they're now coming into not doing less of that, and they did for many centuries. When they had more open society, they did before they were conquered for about 1,000 years now by various outsiders who came in. And so that's about nice, she is keeping us thinking, and we're realizing this the mantra that we should use. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. That's our mantra. Mabana said it, and he did his best. Although he couldn't really, he kept saying, no, we can't once he got in. I think actually they threatened him personally, in my personal opinion, and they threatened his family, and that's why he kind of a little bit clammed up once he got in there. But he still did many good things. And
what does Thurman mean?
Thurman, Thurman means doorman, someone who opens a door. Thurman, it's a very common German name, although the Thurmans were English. There's a Thurmond, M-O-N-D. I'm embarrassed that Strom Thurman was some kind of very distant relative. That's the M-O-N-D spelling. And so they went to South Carolina. All the Thurmans supposedly came to Jamestown. And my mother's side, the Farrers, they were English and they came to Massachusetts and so forth. I don't think they were on the Mayflower, but they came pretty early to Massachusetts and they settled in the Pittsburgh area eventually. And Thurman settled in Mississippi. And William Faulkner was some kind of distant relative. And probably the Thurmans were some of the idiots. He wrote a book called The Idiot. And probably that was about these relatives at Faulkner. And some of my relatives taught at the old Oxford University in Oxford, Mississippi. My father was born in Memphis. But he ran away to New York. So then I have a kind of sense of being from New York, which is this pluralistic cosmopolis. It's Gotham, home of Batman and Superman, and it's kind of very, because of its mixture, I think there's a lot of good things come out of New York, actually. It's a hard city to live in some ways, but in some ways it's also a beacon city. It sends out the light. But when it's captured by foolish people who think money is the only purpose of life, then it broadcasts nonsense, propaganda about money, Wall Street and so on. And that's not good. But, we're doing yes, we can fix that up. Yes, we can. And we will. So although I myself, when I'm the only blonde in my family, well, now it's white, but it used to be blonde. Everybody else in my family was brunette. But my mom, I don't know. She was an actress off Broadway, but I don't think so. I think she was faithful to my dad. But anyway, I'm the only blonde in school. I used to think of myself as Thurman. So I love Thor. So therefore, the latest series of Thor Avengers movies, I love them because I like Thor. Somehow, I do like Thor. I really do. Thurman. But on the other hand, also in India, the Dharma, it's very close to Dharma. D, T are both dental consonants. And then the Da is what's called an aspirated D, Da. So they would not, when they pronounce her name, they say Thurman. With the H just, instead of a th sound, it becomes ta. So Thurman, so Thurman. So when they say like Thurman, it almost sounds like Dharma. So I think that's auspicious. But I don't know, in my previous life, was I going through a phone book before I found my mom on 57th Street and First Avenue, Sutton Place or something, and bam, hit the womb? I don't know. Maybe.
Bob, you are a riot. We love you in such a good way. So fun.
Oh, good.
You brought so much joy to us, and I hope to all the viewers as well.
Good. I hope so. I hope you don't get mad because I mentioned political things, because political things are part of the Dharma practice. They're part of spiritual practice. Politicians should be ethical and spiritual, for sure. Doesn't mean they should be this or that religion either. You can be spiritual without being orthodox in some religion. But you should be spiritual in the sense of believing. If spiritual really means believing in the goodness of life and trying to express it in your own behavior and thinking and feeling. And that's what spiritual really means. It doesn't mean believing some set of dogmas necessarily, because some people who have all these dogmas can be horribly murderous in the name of, and then they think they're justified in doing that in the name of Allah or God or Jehovah or Krishna or whoever they think is good, the ultimate reality is, when they logically think ultimate reality is relating and staying ultimate, and is therefore have to be obeyed. So spirituality means being connected to bigger than yourself, which is goodness, sort of bigger. And the overall goodness of the universe is, of course, bigger than the goodness we can occasionally aspire to. But on the other hand, if we align our lives with that goodness, and then the more good we become, the more popular we will be. People will like us. They'll be good to us back. Some people will take advantage here and there, but in the long run, they'll feel bad about it and they'll be good. And we'll all be really happy. And that's the solution. That's the Dalai Lama. When Dalai Lama came to America in 1979 for the first time, when the Kissinger block and the Brzezinski block was taken off, and Carter and Vance let him come, he said, I'm not representing Buddhism here. I represent the common human religion of kindness. He didn't even say compassion first. He just said kindness. Just be kind and you'll be happy. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thing?
Well, we're out of time now.
Okay.
It's been a great joy and an honor to be with you. I hope we can do many more.
Let's dedicate. In the Buddhist tradition, always you have to dedicate the merit. If we did any good thing here, if Jeffrey Mixlove did, if Amy Vadney did, if I did any good thing, we dedicate that to quickly becoming enlightened ourselves, getting all those supernormal abilities going. And yes, we can, fixing up this world, making everybody else the same as us, not doing it to lord it over anybody else, doing it to get them up to the same level as us. So all of us equally working together democratically, we can fix this mess that we see some silly people making who are confused about what is good and what is not. Okay, and remembering, and so we dedicate the merit to that, and we dedicate the merit to everybody reading and understanding and enjoying and giving to their friends.
It is a good book.
Wisdom is bliss.
Yeah.
Okay?
And ignorance not so much, right, Bob?
Ignorance not so much. That's right. All right. Thank you. Lots of fun.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Thank you,
All
everybody.
right. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Oh gosh, I just